The dream of unity. Pangaea was haunted by visions of division. They started subtly, delicate fractures etching themselves into his rocky hide, almost too faint to register that he perceived them as a faint constriction, like a bothersome shard wedged between scales, but soon, the fissures bloomed, deepened, radiating a searing incandescence that scorched the sprawling forests across his expanse. Rivers of magma gushed from the rents, solidifying into craggy, alien terrains that he convulsed, a soundless, geological agony. Trapped within his immense form, the dreamborn rifts transformed into abysses, cleaving him asunder, severing continent from continent that he witnessed his own sundering into a score of fragments, each cast adrift, solitary in an endless, churning ocean that he jolted awake, a shudder propagating from his volcanic summits to his deepest trenches. Not a true awakening, as humans knew it. Pangaea was consciousness, diffused across an entire landmass, a languid, primeval sentience interwoven with Earth's very essence. But this waking nightmare, it lingered, a residue of dread and a premonition of profound wrongness. Uneasily, he adjusted, gauging his boundaries, feeling the ingrained heft of his consolidated dominion. Gondwana's jungles stirred, sensing his agitation. Creatures that dwelled within his earth shifted, picking up on his unease. Then, it commenced. A tremor, subtle yet definite, rippled through him. It emanated from his core, a growl from the planet's gut that resonated in his granite and basalt bones, not the familiar settling, the everyday creaks of a living sphere. This held a different timbre, sharp, discordant. Laurasia's loftiest peak swayed momentarily, releasing a gossamer fall of snow. The vast inland sea at his heart convulsed, its surface disrupted by unseen powers. He focused his awareness on the epicenter, plunging into the mantle's depths. He felt unimaginable pressures accrue, tectonic plates grinding with excruciating slowness. Always aware of these forces, ever accommodating, yet now they felt, amplified, focused, directed with an incomprehensible purpose. A second quake followed, fiercer this time, coupled with a deep rumble that reverberated across the plains. Fauna scattered, avians took flight in frenzied swarms, and even the ancient, sluggish rivers seemed to pick up their pace. A prickle of alarm coursed through Pangaea, a sensation dormant for millennia. Something was irrevocably, terribly amiss. He extended his awareness, seeking answers from the elements, from the very quintessence of the planet. He probed the atmosphere, the swirling vortex of wind and precipitation, but encountered only bewilderment. He delved into the Earth's bowels, searching for the disturbance's genesis, but found only the immense, unknowable potency of the planet's nucleus. Then, his attention shifted to the sea. He had ever felt a kinship with the boundless ocean surrounding him, the primordial broth from which all life had sprung. He knew the ocean safeguarded secrets, ancestral wisdom predating even his own vast memory. He centered his attention on the western fringe of his land, on the immense body of water known as Tethys. The water shimmered, coalescing into a form, a spiraling vortex of aquamarine and emerald. The waves subsided, the wind stilled, and the air grew heavy with the aroma of salt and brine. From the vortex's core materialized a figure, a woman sculpted of water and light. Her tresses flowed like kelp, her eyes gleamed like sunlit breakers, and her voice was the sound of the sea. Pangaea, she intoned, her voice both tender and commanding. I bring ill tidings. Relief surged through him at her presence, a bond with something familiar and ancient. Tethys, he responded, his voice a profound rumble that shook the very ground. I sense a tumult, a disharmony within my very core. Tell me, what is unfolding? Sorrow clouded Tethys's features. That dream, Pangaea, it wasn't merely a figment. It was a glimpse of what looms. A frigid dread seeped through him. Sundering, he whispered, the word acrid on his non-existent tongue. Am I to be shattered? Tethys inclined her head, her gaze laced with pity. Such is your destiny, Pangaea. The forces within you are too potent, the pressures too overwhelming. You cannot endure as one. He recoiled, a tidal wave of denial engulfing him. No, I am unity, I am wholeness incarnate, I cannot be rent asunder. Such you are now, Tethys said softly. But the world shifts, life evolves, proliferates, seeds of change have been sown, requiring space to germinate. You are too expansive, too monolithic, you suffocate the potential within. But what of me? He pleaded. What of the creatures reliant on me? They are molded to this single landmass, to this unified existence. They will not weather the fragmentation. They will adapt, Tethys stated, with unwavering firmness. Life invariably finds purchase, and from that separation, new prospects will arise, new ecosystems will thrive, the continents birthed from your division will each possess a distinct character, a unique spectrum of life. He struggled to assimilate her words, to concede the inevitability of his fate. But the agony, he groaned, the torment of being torn apart, it is unbearable. A long and harrowing ordeal it will be, Tethys conceded. Earthquakes, volcanic cataclysms, eruptive events are inevitable, but you are strong, Pangaea, you shall endure, and in the end, discover a new form of being, a new purpose. He gazed toward the horizon, at the boundless ocean soon to claim him. He saw the swirling currents, the teeming life beneath the waves, the potential for emergent worlds. He saw the future, one of divergence and diversification, a future beyond his command. Why, he asked, his voice suffused with despair. Why must this be? Tethys merely shook her head. It is the way of existence, Pangaea, the universe is in endless flux, eternally evolving, eternally changing, you are integral to that process, a necessary passage in the grand cosmic ballet. She began to dissipate, her form dissolving back into the sea. Remember, Pangaea, she said, her voice diminishing. Even in sundering, there is connection, the continents that emerge from you will still be bound by the same planet, the same atmosphere, the same shared destiny. Then, she vanished, leaving Pangaea alone beneath the crushing weight of his impending doom. The tremors escalated, stronger, more frequent. He felt the initial cracks emerge, minuscule fissures snaking across his surface like inflamed, crimson veins. The dream was becoming reality, the cataclysm had begun, cracks in the earth. Pangaea shuddered, a profound, internal ache that resonated with the frantic beat of his molten heart. He fought the sensation, anchoring himself to the familiar pressure of the all-encompassing ocean that embraced him. Tethys is mistaken. He mentally asserted. Alteration isn't invariably advancement, steadfastness equates to power. Yet, the tremors intensified, demanding acknowledgement. A subtle vibration, a low thrum beneath his lithosphere, escalated into a fierce convulsion, rattling his loftiest summits and whipping up dust devils across his expansive plains. He felt the very ground beneath him resisting, moaning beneath an unbearable load. Halt, Pangaea reverberated, the sound rising from the deep gorges that etched his surface. It was less a command and more a desperate entreaty against the inevitable. Please, just cease. His plea met a thunderous response. A long-dormant volcano, slumbering for ages, burst open along his eastern edge, unleashing a deluge of liquid fire and ash. The skies blackened, suffocated by a stinging, acrid pall that dimmed the sun. Rivers of magma, serpentine and destructive, carved paths down his slopes, consuming everything in their wake. The sharp tang of sulfur and burning matter saturated his senses, a sickening assault compounded by the swell of his own trepidation. He attempted to brace himself, to reinforce his continental shelf, to somehow force the fracturing landmass back together, but the opposing forces were too dominant. The stress peaked, venting itself in a series of cataclysmic quakes that ripped through him like unseen talons. Structures crumbled, mountains fractured, his very essence was being rent apart. Tethys, he cried, a desperate, ragged exhalation. What is befalling me? Silence followed, save for the grinding of tectonic plates and the stifling heat from the volcanic displays. A wave of resentment washed over Pangaea. Where was the comforting presence, the calming assurance? Had Tethys deserted him to this excruciating fate? Then, a voice, distant yet distinct, echoed within his awareness. The process has commenced, Pangaea, you must reconcile with it. Reconcile, he bellowed, the sound swallowed by the destructive symphony. How can I reconcile with this? This is demise. It is metamorphosis, Tethys corrected, her tone gentle. A trying one, assuredly, but vital. Observe closely, Pangaea, observe what you are evolving into. He reluctantly complied, summoning his focus amidst the pandemonium. He discerned, tracing the paths of the fiercest tremors, that something novel was birthing. Profound fissures, wider than any canyon he had previously known, slashed through his land. They branched and twisted, forming a web of gaping wounds that wept molten rock and superheated vapor. Then came the deluge, initially, merely a trickle, seeping into the rifts from the edges of Tethys's vast expanse. Yet, the trickle became a stream. Then a river, then a cascade. The sheer volume proved overwhelming, inundating the newly formed gashes and quenching the fiery temper of the volcanoes. The hissing and steaming intensified where water met liquid fire, generating towering plumes of vapor and corrosive rain. Pangaea registered a peculiar, alien sensation, a bone-chilling coolness permeating his core. It was an unwanted incursion, an alien presence invading his very self. The water persisted its onslaught, gouging deeper and broader channels into his terrain. He watched aghast as the first true rifts materialized, immense chasms spanning hundreds of miles, and then, with a final, harrowing groan, the land between the rifts yielded, the ocean charged forward, filling the nascent valleys and troughs. Inland seas arose, shimmering blue expanses mirroring the fragmented sky. They possessed a severe, brutal beauty, a perpetual reminder of his loss. He felt the initial, tentative separation commenced. A colossal landmass to the north, edging away, another to the south, resisting the connecting isthmus. He was being peeled apart, fragment by fragment, his unified being shattered into components. Panic threatened to engulf him. He was losing purchase, losing himself. Was this truly progress, this tormenting disintegration? He gazed upon the newly formed inland seas, the swirling pillars of vapor and ash, the fractured panorama that was formerly his solitary, unbroken form. Behold! Tethys's voice resonated once more, now with unwavering conviction. Behold the potential, fresh coastlines, unexplored ecosystems, untapped possibilities for life to proliferate in ways you could never have envisioned. Pangaea resisted seeing the potential. He craved the old stability, the comforting pressure of unbroken territory, but the fractures widened, the seas expanded, and the future, regardless of his desires, descended upon him with unrelenting force. No longer hold. He was becoming legion, and the pain had merely commenced. The drifting continents. The rending was complete. Pangaea was no more than a memory, a phantom ache in the deep earth. Now, Laurasia and Gondwana, sister behemoths born of his splitting, faced each other across the widening Tethys. The ancient sea, once a promise of connection, now symbolized division, its turquoise expanse a chasm reflecting the uncertainties of their nascent existences. Laurasia, the northern daughter, felt a familiar chill creep down her spine. She shuddered, not from pain, but from a profound sense of exposure. The unified warmth she'd known was fading, replaced by the icy breath of the Arctic winds that now swept unhindered across her plains. Evergreen forests, thick and resilient, began to dominate the higher latitudes, their needle-like leaves adapted to the long, dark winters. Further south, broadleaf trees unfurled, vying for sunlight in the warmer, wetter regions. "It's different," Laurasia murmured, the rustle of her forests echoing her unease. "Colder, barer." She stretched her nascent mountain ranges, feeling the strain of the shift and pressure, the rearrangement of her very bones. Gondwana, the southern sister, felt a surge of rebellious energy. The separation from Pangaea hadn't brought her cold, it had unleashed a latent fire. Volcanoes, remnants of the cataclysmic splitting, still coughed plumes of ash into the sky, fertilizing the land with rich minerals. Lush rainforests exploded with life, a riot of color and sound unlike anything Laurasia could imagine. Giant ferns unfurled like emerald banners, and strange, unfamiliar insects buzzed through the humid air. "Different is good," Gondwana rumbled, her voice the deep tremor of tectonic plates shifting beneath her. "Different is opportunity." She felt a strange pull towards the south, towards the icy embrace of the nascent Antarctic, a region that was rapidly becoming her own. Between them, the Tethys widened relentlessly, a hungry maw carving a path through the earth. Currents stirred, carrying nutrients and dispersing life, connecting disparate ecosystems in unexpected ways. Fish, unlike any that had swam in Pangaea's unified ocean, began to flourish in the newly formed coastal waters, along Gondwana's northern edge, where the Tethys lapped against her shores. The seeds of the Himalayas were being sown. Two immense landmasses, India and Asia, were on a collision course, driven by forces far beyond their comprehension. The earth buckled and groaned under the immense pressure, and the first folds of the Proto-Himalayas began to rise, jagged and unforgiving against the skyline. Laurasia watched the distant upheaval with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "What is happening there?" she asked, her voice a low murmur that barely carried across the water. Gondwana felt the tremors reverberate through her core. "The earth is still shaping itself," she replied, her tone laced with a hint of something akin to pride. "It is," creating something new, something immense. The rising mountains had a profound effect on the global climate. They disrupted wind patterns, creating rain shadows and arid deserts on one side, and torrential downpours on the other. Rivers, born from the melting snows of the high peaks, carved deep valleys and carried sediment to the sea, further shaping the landscape and the isolation of these newly formed environments. Life diversified at an astonishing rate. On Laurasia, small, furry creatures scurried through the undergrowth, their warm blood allowing them to thrive in the cooler temperatures. These early mammals, survivors of the Pangean extinction, began to evolve and diversify, filling the ecological niches left vacant by the dinosaurs. On Gondwana, giant reptiles still roamed the rainforests, but even here, change was afoot. Birds, descendants of the dinosaurs, took to the skies, their colorful plumage a stark contrast to the green foliage. Marsupials, strange and pouched, hopped across the land, their unique reproductive strategies giving them an advantage in the rapidly changing environment. The tethys, once a symbol of division, also became a conduit for exchange. Plants, carried by the wind and currents, established themselves on distant shores. Animals, rafted on floating debris, colonized new territories. The world was becoming a tapestry of interconnected ecosystems, each unique, yet all linked by the relentless forces of nature. Despite the burgeoning life, a sense of melancholy hung in the air. The memory of Pangaea, of unity and shared purpose, lingered like a ghost. Laurasia and Gondwana, though separate, still felt the echoes of their shared origin, the bond that had once bound them together. "Do you ever miss it?" Laurasia whispered, her voice carried on the wind. "The way things were." Gondwana paused, the roar of her volcanoes momentarily subdued. "I remember," she said, her voice a deep rumble. "But the past is gone. We must look to the future. To what we can become." As the millennia stretched into epochs, Laurasia and Gondwana continued to drift, to evolve, to shape themselves into the continents that would one day be home to countless species, including the one that would look up at the stars and wonder about the origins of the world. The fragmentation of Pangaea was not an end, but a beginning. A painful birth, but a birth nonetheless, and the drifting continents, scarred but resilient, were ready to embrace their destiny. Asteroids' fury. A silent predator, unseen, unheard, for eons, hurtled through the void. Laurasia, basking in a relatively stable, if still chilly, spring, was oblivious. A herd of Corythosaurus, grazing near a network of freshwater lakes that would one day be called Canada, were the first to witness the approaching doom. One moment, the sky was a pale, washed-out blue. The next, a searing line of light ripped across it. Growing exponentially, the earth trembled, a low thrumming that vibrated through the dinosaurs' massive legs. Then came the sound, a deafening roar that shattered the air and sent the herd stampeding in panicked disarray. Miles above, the asteroid, a jagged shard of cosmic debris 10 kilometers wide, slammed into the shallow sea bordering what would become the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The water vaporized, creating a cavity in the ocean floor that expanded outward at supersonic speed. Rock turned to plasma. A blinding flash engulfed the landscape, followed by an earth-shattering explosion that dwarfed any volcanic eruption in Gondwana's fiery past. The Corythosaurus never stood a chance. The shockwave, a wall of compressed air traveling faster than the speed of sound, flattened forests for hundreds of miles. Trees snapped like twigs, animals were hurled through the air, their bodies ripped apart by the force. The heat pulse ignited everything flammable, turning vast swathes of Laurasia into a raging inferno. Across the Tethys Sea, in Gondwana, the tremors were felt with equal ferocity. The ground buckled and swayed. Volcanoes, already simmering with activity, erupted with renewed vigor, spewing ash and lava into the sky. The lush forests, teeming with marsupials and early birds, shuddered as the seismic waves passed through. The immediate aftermath was a nightmare of fire, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Giant waves, hundreds of feet high, surged across the Tethys Sea, crashing against the shores of both Laurasia and Gondwana. Coastal ecosystems were obliterated. The once vibrant coral reefs, bustling with life, were reduced to rubble. But the true devastation was yet to come. The impact had ejected billions of tons of dust, soot, and vaporized rock into the atmosphere. This debris spread rapidly around the globe, blocking out the sun. Darkness descended upon the continents, plunging the world into a prolonged twilight. Photosynthesis ground to a halt. Plants, the foundation of the food chain, withered and died. Herbivores, like the Corythosaurus and the numerous hadrosaurs of Laurasia, starved. Carnivores, deprived of their prey, followed suit. The great dinosaurs, rulers of the planet for over 150 million years, were teetering on the brink. In Gondwana, the impact. Winter was equally devastating. The marsupials, smaller and more adaptable than their Laurasian counterparts, fared slightly better, scavenging for whatever scraps they could find, but even they suffered immense losses. The forests, once a haven of life, became silent graveyards. The oceans fared no better. The dust and debris poisoned the water, killing off plankton and algae, the base of the marine food web. Marine reptiles, like the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, starved, their massive bodies washing ashore on desolate beaches. The asteroid's fury did not just bring death, it also reshaped the continents. The impact created a massive crater, now buried beneath layers of sediment, that would eventually become the Yucatan Peninsula. The earthquakes and tsunamis triggered landslides and coastal erosion, altering coastlines and carving new river valleys. But the most profound change was the acceleration of evolutionary processes. With the dinosaurs gone, a void was left in the ecological landscape. The surviving mammals and birds, small and unassuming creatures that had lived in the shadow of the giants, now had an opportunity to thrive. They diversified rapidly, filling the ecological niches left vacant by the extinct reptiles. New species emerged, adapted to the changed environment. The age of dinosaurs was over. The age of mammals had begun. Laurasia, scarred and battered, slowly began to recover. The sun eventually broke through the dust cloud, bringing warmth and light back to the land. New forests sprouted from the ashes of the old, and the surviving mammals, shrew-like creatures and early primates, ventured out into the revitalized landscape. Gondwana, too, experienced a rebirth. The marsupials, along with the birds and other surviving reptiles, adapted to the new conditions. The continent, once a single landmass, continued to drift apart, its pieces moving slowly but inexorably towards their future destinations. The memory of the asteroid's fury would forever be etched into its rocks and its ecosystems, a constant reminder of the cataclysm that had reshaped the world. The continents, forever changed, were set on new trajectories, their destinies intertwined with the legacy of the impact. Lucy's footprint. Time, once a raging torrent, mellowed into a slow, deliberate river. Laurasia, fractured and sprawling, was becoming Europe and Asia, the nascent Atlantic widening between them. Gondwana, too, was fragmenting, its pieces inching away to become Africa, South America, Australia, and Antarctica, each embarking on its own evolutionary voyage. Mountains rose and eroded, rivers carved new paths, and forests gave way to grasslands as climates shifted with the continental ballet. The earth, scarred but not broken, was healing, slowly painting a new masterpiece of life. In the heart of the newly formed African continent, a different kind of drama was unfolding, one measured not in millennia but in generations. The air, thick and humid, vibrated with the chirps and calls of insects, the rustle of unseen creatures in the tall grasses, and the distant roar of predators. Here, in the cradle of what would one day be known as humanity, lived a small band of hominids. Among them was a young female, small even for her kind, whom we might call Lucy. Lucy's world was one of constant vigilance. The sun beat down relentlessly, baking the savannah into a dry, cracked landscape. Water was scarce, and competition for resources was fierce. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow, held the potential for danger. She learned to distinguish the wind's whisper from the slither of a snake, the playful chatter of monkeys from the guttural growl of a leopard. Her days were a relentless cycle of foraging, scavenging, and evading predators. She used crude tools, sharp stones and broken branches, to dig for roots and tubers, crack open nuts, and defend herself. The calluses on her hands were a testament to her hard work, the scrapes and bruises on her limbs a record of close calls. One scorching afternoon, while searching for water near a dried-up riverbed, Lucy spotted a group of vultures circling overhead. Her stomach growled with hunger, but caution held her back. Vultures meant carrion, and carrion often meant predators. She crept closer, scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. The vultures were gathered around the carcass of a large antelope, picked clean by scavengers. A pride of lions, their bellies full, lay nearby, drowsing in the shade of an acacia tree. Lucy knew she couldn't challenge them directly. Instead, she waited, patiently observing their movements. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the savannah, the lions stirred, they stretched, yawned, and then, one by one, wandered off in search of a new hunting ground. Lucy knew this was her chance. She darted forward, grabbing a few scraps of meat clinging to the antelope's bones. The meat was tough and sinewy, but it was enough to stave off her hunger for another day. As she ate, she noticed something else, a scattering of marrow-rich bones that the lions had discarded. An idea sparked in her mind. She picked up a large stone and, using it as a hammer, carefully cracked open one of the bones. The marrow was rich and fatty, a valuable source of energy. This small act, this resourceful adaptation, was a turning point. Lucy's ability to learn, to adapt, to use tools to her advantage, was what set her apart. She taught her offspring, and they taught theirs. Over generations, these skills were refined and passed down, shaping their minds and bodies. They learned to stand more upright, freeing their hands for carrying tools and food. Their brains grew larger, allowing them to think more strategically and communicate more effectively. They were evolving, slowly but inexorably, towards something new. One day, Lucy, weary from her long life, walked across a patch of soft volcanic ash. She left behind a clear footprint, a testament to her existence, a symbol of her struggle, and a promise of what was to come. The wind would erase the marks, but the legacy would endure, etched into the very fabric of the earth. The continents drifted on, oblivious to the small but momentous events unfolding on their surfaces, the rise of mammals, and the slow, arduous journey of humankind, had begun. A canyon's tale. Time, like a tireless sculptor, continued its work. On the landmass now known as North America, a slow, grinding drama was unfolding. The Colorado Plateau, a vast expanse of uplifted rock, stood defiant against the sky, but the river, a relentless serpent of water and sediment, had other plans. The Colorado River, a mere trickle at first, had discovered a weakness, a hairline fracture in the plateau's armor. With each passing millennium, the trickle grew, a determined stream, gnawing, dissolving, carrying away grains of sand and pebbles. The plateau, stubborn as it was, slowly yielded. Earthquakes, sporadic and violent, punctuated the river's steady erosion. The ground groaned, shuddered, and new fissures opened, offering the river new avenues to explore. Volcanic eruptions, fiery belches from the earth's depths, spewed molten rock, temporarily halting the carving, only to be conquered later by the river's persistent flow. The river didn't just cut down, it also cut back, headward erosion. The subtle retreat of waterfalls and rapids extended the canyon's reach, consuming the plateau inch by relentless inch. Ancient seabeds, remnants of a time when this land was submerged, were exposed, layer upon layer, each stratum whispering tales of bygone eras. The Kaibab limestone, the Coconino sandstone, the Hermit shale, each layer a chapter in the Earth's autobiography, now laid bare for the sun and wind to read. As the canyon deepened, the climate shifted. Ice ages came and went, leaving their mark on the landscape. Glaciers, massive rivers of ice, carved U-shaped valleys further north, while the Colorado River, spared from the direct icy grip, continued its incision, its V-shaped scar deepening and widening. The forces at play were immense, almost incomprehensible: the uplift of the plateau, the downcutting of the river, the relentless cycle of erosion and deposition. It was a symphony of geological processes, conducted over eons, with the earth itself as the instrument. And then came the people. They arrived much later, long after the canyon had taken on its majestic form. They were the ancestors of the modern-day Hopi, Navajo, and other tribes, drawn to the canyon's beauty and its promise of sustenance. They saw the canyon not as a geological marvel, but as a sacred place, imbued with the spirits of their ancestors. They told stories around crackling fires, tales passed down through generations, explaining the canyon's origins. Some spoke of a great flood, sent by angry gods, that carved the canyon in a single, cataclysmic event. Others told of a giant serpent, whose movements created the canyon's winding path. An old Hopi woman, her face etched with the wisdom of ages, shared her tribe's legend with her grandchildren. The canyon, she said, her voice raspy as the desert wind, is a reminder of our connection to the earth. It is a place of power, a place of healing. We must respect it, for it is older than we are, and it will be here long after we are gone. She pointed to the towering walls of the canyon, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. See the colors, each layer tells a story. The red is the blood of our ancestors, the yellow is the sun's blessing, the white is the purity of the spirit. A young boy, his eyes wide with wonder, asked, "Grandmother, will the canyon ever be finished? The old woman smiled knowingly. The canyon, she replied, is never finished. That it is always changing, always evolving, just like us. The Colorado River continued its work, oblivious to the legends and the reverence that it carved deeper, wider, its muddy waters carrying away more sediment, shaping the landscape according to forces far beyond human comprehension. The Grand Canyon, a testament to the power of time and the relentless energy of the earth, stood as a monument to the ongoing drama of continental evolution. A story written in stone, for anyone who cared to listen. The canyon was a scar, yes, but a beautiful scar, a badge of honor earned through millennia of geological struggle, a visual representation of Pangaea's legacy, the fossil secret. The Karoo supergroup's exposed rock glared under the sun's full might, turning the South African soil to a brittle, ochre crust. Sweat glued Dr. Aris Thorne's dark hair to his brow as he meticulously tapped at the shale with his hammer. Fine particles shimmered in the air, momentarily obscuring his vision in the intense glare that he swiped at his forehead with a grimy hand. For weeks, he'd been scouring this isolated landscape, following a hunch, a silent prompting he deciphered from the very bones of the earth. A sudden, unexpected resistance met the hammer. A different resonance, a sharper note. Thorne's pulse quickened. Delicately, he widened the newly formed crack, holding his breath. Within, a section of bone lay embedded, a dark, chocolate fossil, not just any bone, but a therapsid jaw, forebear to all mammals, yet its size, its very structure. It defied anything he had previously encountered. Hours slipped by as he labored to free the surrounding stone. As the sun descended, draping the scene in long, dramatic shadows, the complete fossil emerged. An intact, exquisitely preserved skull of a Cynognathus, the dog-jawed reptile. But this was no ordinary specimen. It was larger, more powerfully built, exhibiting subtle yet significant cranial deviations, and then his gaze locked onto it, a clear impression of Glossopteris flora, that iconic fern from Gondwana, imprinted in the matrix. But this fossil matched, with uncanny precision, the Glossopteris relics he had extracted from Antarctic rock years prior, down to the finest vein. With hands trembling from a mixture of elation and the weight of the discovery, Aris secured the fossil for transport. This was it, the corroborating evidence he sought, concrete proof that continents now divided by oceanic expanses had once been joined. Back in London, the Royal Geological Society's venerable halls seemed unusually frigid. Aris, feeling the nervous flutter of anticipation, straightened his tie, a loud Paisley he usually avoided. Before entering Professor Evelyn Reed's domain, her office stood as a monument to a distinguished past, adorned with certificates, accolades, and meticulously curated shelves crammed with geological treatises. Evelyn Reed, possessing both a keen intellect and an imposing manner, sat behind a vast mahogany desk, her silver hair sculpted into a perfect arrangement. Lifting her gaze from a document pile, her expression remained inscrutable. "Thorne, you requested an audience. That I trust you have something of import to present?" Aris cleared his throat. "Professor Reed, I've made a remarkable discovery in South Africa. A Cynognathus fossil, dissimilar to any documentation I've reviewed. It holds significant implications regarding the understanding of continental positioning." He unrolled a meticulously rendered sketch of the find, highlighting the subtle morphological variations and the essential Glossopteris inclusion. "The floral signature aligns precisely with Antarctic examples I uncovered." Evelyn leaned back, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Continental drift, Thorne, that antiquated theory, I believed we had relegated that to the history books long ago. Stationary continents have always provided a more consistent framework." She pressed her fingertips together, a gesture Aris recognized as a prelude to a well-rehearsed lecture. "The fossil record permits a multitude of interpretations. Floral and faunal parallels can easily be attributed to land bridges, now submerged beneath the waves. Or even, might I add, convergent evolution. But Professor, the bone structure, the stratigraphy, Aris started, his voice gaining a sharper edge. Evelyn silenced him with a dismissive wave. "Thorne, you are an exceptional field researcher. I concede that, however, you lack the discipline vital for theoretical extrapolation. You perceive what you wish to perceive, swayed by your personal, romanticized notions of a restless earth." Aris felt the heat of indignation rising in his face. "Romanticized notions, this transcends sentiment, Professor, this is empirical data, the fossil attests to itself." Fossils are voiceless, Thorne, Evelyn countered, her tone piercing. They articulate only through the lens of the interpreter, and my interpretation, founded upon decades of scholarship and rigorous inquiry, suggests your remarkable discovery amounts to nothing more than an aberration, that a slight difference within the species, intriguing, certainly, though hardly a revelation. She picked up a paperweight, a polished granite sample, turning it over in her hand. I suggest you redirect your talents toward more demonstrable inquiries, Thorne, before you tarnish your reputation with these fanciful hypotheses. Eris met her gaze, his jaw clenched that he had anticipated disagreement, but this absolute rejection, this refusal to even entertain the prospect of error, stung like a slap that he understood he couldn't sway her through words alone, that he needed to introduce the fossil itself, to compel her to confront the undeniable proof. Understood, Professor, he replied, managing to keep his voice even. I would, however, be grateful if you would evaluate the fossil when it arrives from South Africa, witness it firsthand. Evelyn exhaled, a flicker of something akin to vexation briefly crossing her features. Very well, Thorne, display this fossil, but do not anticipate a ready conversion. She diverted her attention back to her documents, dismissing him with a brief nod. Departing her office, Eris felt a tightening in his gut that he knew he opposed a formidable adversary, a woman who had dedicated her life to a fixed view of the world, but he also knew, with unwavering conviction, that he was in the right, that he would prove it, regardless of the personal cost. The fossil concealed a message, the key to unlocking Earth's primordial past, that he would not yield until that secret stood revealed. The presentation. Eris cradled the cased fossil, its weight a stark reminder of the pivotal moment in his career. Sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford. Professor Reed's scornful expression haunted him. Each cutting remark had only hardened his resolve that he would be heard. His university office was a chaotic testament to his obsession. Geological maps, dense with annotations pinpointing fossil sites and formations, wallpapered every inch of space. Pressed Glossopteris fronds, like antique emblems, decorated the walls, that he felt submerged in data, yet paralyzed by the knowledge that its power lay in its presentation. That he relentlessly practiced his lecture, pacing before an invisible assembly. Arguments were honed, anticipating Reed's every counter. His voice was carefully modulated, seeking a balance between confidence and respectful deference. That he wasn't aiming to overthrow Reed, merely to offer an alternative view, supported by irrefutable physical evidence. The day unfolded, heavy with expectation. A nervous hum vibrated through the packed lecture hall. Eris recognized faces from the geology department, a mixture of curiosity and outright antagonism etched on their features. That he saw Professor Reed in the front row, her face a mask of impenetrable skepticism. Her presence felt like a tangible barrier, radiating disapproval. That he carefully placed the Synagnithus fossil on the table. Its mere presence seemed to command the room's attention. That he inhaled deeply, the comforting aroma of aged leather and chalk anchoring him. That he began to speak. That he initiated his lecture by establishing the context, acknowledging the historical importance of the stationary continent theory. Then, he meticulously chronicled his discovery of the Synagnithus fossil, highlighting its unique characteristics, and the critical presence of Glossopteris flora encased within the surrounding matrix. This is no ordinary Synagnithus, he declared, projecting an enhanced image of the fossil. The plant inclusions are a precise match to those found in Antarctic rock from the same era. Precise. How do we account for this shared terrestrial reptile and vegetation across continents separated by vast oceanic distances? He paused, letting the question resonate. Evidence unfolded, matching geological formations across continents, mirroring magnetic anomalies on the ocean floor, and the jigsaw congruence of South America and Africa. He constructed his case meticulously, revealing a dynamic planet, a world of shifting continents. When he finally unveiled the fossil, a shared intake of breath swept through the hall. The Synagnithus, impeccably preserved, appeared to gaze at the audience, a silent relic of a lost epoch. The Glossopteris fronds, fragile and intricate, adhered to the rock, a botanical signature connecting landmasses across eons. A profound silence descended. Then, a low murmur spread, crescendoing into a clamor of voices. Professor Reed remained still, her gaze unwavering on the fossil. At last, she spoke, her voice slicing through the din. Dr. Thorne, she began, her tone deceptively gentle, your presentation is persuasive. However, correlation alone is not proof of causation. Similar fossils and flora could be explained by now submerged landmasses, or even by seed dispersal through natural means. Professor Reed, Aris retorted, his voice steady, the scope of these discoveries renders such explanations implausible. Submerged land bridges of that scale would have left substantial geological footprints, and wind and currents cannot account for the exact duplication of entire ecosystems across continents. The debate erupted, geologists chimed in, some rallying behind Aris, others fiercely defending established principles. Claims of flawed methodology and selective interpretation flew through the air. The lecture hall transformed into a battleground of competing scientific viewpoints. Dr. Alastair Humphrey, a paleobotanist known for his cautious approach, questioned Aris's dating techniques for the Glossopteris. Dr. Chen, a geophysicist specializing in plate tectonics, offered tentative support for Aris's interpretation of the magnetic anomalies. The atmosphere became a vortex of conflicting arguments. Amid the noise, Aris noticed a young geologist, Dr. Lena Hansen, scribbling with intense focus in her notepad, her brow deeply creased. She remained silent, but her rapt attention gave Aris a glimmer of hope that he knew that changing deeply ingrained beliefs would be a protracted, uphill battle. The presentation concluded inconclusively, Professor Reed, delivering a final, dismissive evaluation, exited the hall, her acolytes following like devoted members of a retinue. The atmosphere in the room hung with unresolved tension. Aris stood alone, surrounded by the aftermath of his lecture. The fossils weighed a palpable burden that he had sowed a seed of doubt. Whether it would germinate and flourish remained to be discerned. Shifting plates, shifting minds. Evelyn Reed, brow furrowed beneath the harsh glare of her lab's fluorescent lights, remained tethered to her meticulously arranged rock samples. Aris Thorne's presentation needled at her composure, a relentless undercurrent to her focus. She scrutinized the basalt's ocean floor magnetic striping, the very data she had resolutely brandished to defend her long-held belief in a static Earth, symmetrical, undeniably so. Emanating from the mid-ocean ridges, her interpretation had always been consistent. Evidence of periodic magnetic reversals, the planet's poles flipping while the ocean crust remained steadfast. But a nagging question arose: what if the crust was in motion, propelled from those very ridges? She unfurled a world map, a calloused finger tracing the jigsaw puzzle edges of South America and Africa. The congruence was unsettling. For years, she'd brushed it aside as happenstance, a mere geographical oddity. Now, with Thorne's Synognathus fossil and its shared Glossopteris flora seared into her memory, doubt blossomed, an icy tendril coiling in her core. Days dissolved into weeks as Evelyn succumbed to a torrent of research. She devoured tomes on paleomagnetism, seafloor spreading, and the seemingly chaotic distribution of ancient climates. She revisited her own findings, subjecting them to an unforgiving assessment. The more she absorbed, the more the evidence coalesced, painting a portrait of a dynamic, ever-changing planet. One particularly punishing night, fueled by stale coffee and burgeoning disquiet, she encountered a paper detailing the recent discovery of identical trilobite fossils on opposite sides of the Atlantic. Trilobites, ancient marine creatures, were notoriously feeble swimmers. How could they possibly have navigated such a formidable chasm? The question lingered, a palpable weight in a small lab. Evelyn pushed away from her desk, the chair groaning against the worn linoleum. She drifted to the window, her gaze lost in the inky void of the night. The city lights glimmered below, an expansive, complex network mirroring the intricate latticework of scientific data she had been grappling with. Suddenly, enlightenment struck. The fossils, the magnetic signatures, the continental fit, the distribution of mountain ranges, it wasn't a random assortment of coincidences. It was a unified narrative, a tale of a world perpetually in flux, a tale she had stubbornly refused to acknowledge. A wave of exhaustion swept through her, giving way to an unexpected sense of liberation. She had been so constricted by her own convictions, so deeply entrenched in established doctrine, that she had overlooked the glaring truth that it was a humbling, even lacerating, revelation. The scientific community didn't immediately embrace this new perspective. Professor Reed, once a staunch detractor, began subtly suggesting alternative avenues of exploration at conferences. Others, fortified by Thorne's initial presentation and Reed's quiet shift, began articulating their own misgivings. The initial opposition waned, yielding to cautious intrigue. New research grants materialized, specifically earmarked for plate tectonics and paleogeography. Slowly, meticulously, the scientific consensus commenced its transformation. It was an incremental acceptance, a laborious process of reassessing decades of entrenched thought, but the tide was turning. Meanwhile, beyond the grasp of mortal comprehension, Pangaea sensed the quakes, the profound lament of its own immense structure. No longer a monolith, it perceived itself in disarray. Continents wrenching apart, each charting its own divergent course. It observed the expanding oceans, the ascendant mountain chains, and the evolution of life on the newly isolated land masses. It witnessed the flourishing of unique flora and fauna in isolation, creating a vibrant mosaic of biodiversity previously unknown. The marsupials of the Australian continent, secluded and preserved, diversified into a stunning spectrum of forms. The primates of Africa, destined to evolve into humankind, prospered in the verdant forests. Pangaea discerned its purpose. Its sundering was not an ending, but a genesis. A necessary sacrifice, a cosmic act of creation that enabled life to proliferate and diversify in ways that would have been impossible on a single, unified landmass. The torment of separation lingered, a profound ache in its geological heart, but it was soothed by the awareness that it was fulfilling its role in the grand symphony of Earth's unfolding. It was a harrowing parturition, but from it, a new, vibrant world was emerging. The continents continued their glacial, inexorable journey. Guided by the hidden forces within the Earth's mantle, Eris Thorne, vindicated yet undeterred, pressed forward with his research, charting the ancient shorelines and following the trajectories of the wandering continents. Evelyn Reed, chastened and enlightened, became a champion of the novel paradigm, leveraging her influence and expertise to foster understanding and acceptance of the dynamic planet. The world, both human and geological, was irrevocably altered. The shifting plates had rearranged perceptions, and an enlightened epoch had dawned. An Earth in motion. Salty air whipped at Evelyn's cheeks as she stood with Eris atop the cliffs, the tempestuous Atlantic crashing below. The former severity in her posture, the sharp glint in her eyes, had softened. A quiet pensiveness radiated from her, a marked contrast to the relentless assault of the waves. "It rather puts things in perspective, doesn't it?" she murmured, her voice battling the wind. "To comprehend the scale of my misjudgment." Eris nodded, his gaze drawn to the horizon. "We all stumble, eventually. The planet remains indifferent to our pronouncements, concerned only with its ancient, unhurried rhythm." He swept his hand toward the seemingly boundless ocean. "Consider the energies simmering beneath us, Evelyn, the searing heat, crushing pressure, the molten core churning. Our very presence here feels almost improbable." Evelyn shuddered, the chill more than just physical. "My life's work has been the study of rocks, dissecting layers, meticulously charting formations. I perceive them as immutable, permanent, but they breathe, don't they, their fleeting frames in an epic, ongoing spectacle." "Precisely," Eris affirmed, a subtle smile gracing his lips. "And the fossil record, our surviving reels of film. A chronicle of who existed where, and when." Turning to face her, renewed purpose sparked in his eyes. "This reframes everything, Evelyn, our understanding of evolution, climate dynamics, the very architecture of existence. Imagine the implications for stewardship of resources, predicting cataclysms, grasping our place in the cosmic tapestry." Evelyn inhaled deeply. "It's breathtaking. Where do we even begin to unravel it?" Eris retrieved a well-worn map, unfolding it on a relatively smooth rock surface.